Hi guys, welcome back. It is time for another morning brew with Blah. Today I am having a peppermint tea and I'm going to talk to you about baby schedules or baby routines. For those of you who don't know me, hi, I'm Bláithín. I am a retired wedding planner and author. I am now a stay-at-home mom and I am researching my third book. I have two beautiful daughters in heaven and one gorgeous son, Indiana James, who is 4.5 months old. And I make videos about motherhood and lifestyle. And as I said, today we're going to talk baby routines. So let's go. I'm sure, like most of you, when I was pregnant, I read the baby books, the baby blogs, I was looking on Pinterest. For me, a large part of my pregnancy was trying to imagine or envisage what I was going to be like when I was at home, living that day-to-day life with a new baby. It was just impossible for me to imagine or envisage that. And so I thought that these baby schedules and baby routines would sort of give me an idea, and I would watch baby routines on YouTube and, you know, see what other mums were up to. And the one thing I noticed, which I felt was unrealistic and have discovered is definitely unrealistic, is that especially when it came to the baby routine charts and schedules listed on Pinterest and the downloadables and the ones that were printed in books, they were just about the baby. There was no inclusion of you, the mum, the dad, the family, the wider family. The expectation was that the new schedule was just focused on the baby. 1 minute, I can hear my dog about to attack the bin. And I felt personally that the way these things were listed or presented to me was already setting me up for a fail, in that my whole life was now just going to be about the baby. There was nothing outside, you know, sort of getting the baby dressed, feeding the baby, changing the baby, playing with the baby. And in theory, that sounds both wonderful and terrifying at one time. And so I quickly thought to myself, there is more to life than having a baby than it being all about the baby. Of course the baby is important, but this is what I learned. The first thing is we, as in my husband and I, took the time to learn our baby's natural schedule. Now this has evolved and changed as he's developed and grown, and it sort of has ebbed and flowed. But more or less there is a basic structure there that he's always had since we brought him home. Now I will probably let you in on a secret, something that a lot of people may hate me for. I have a unicorn baby, in the sense that since the day we brought him home from the hospital, he has slept through the night, every single night with the exception of one. About 10 or 12 days ago, during the night, he randomly cried out for about 2 minutes, 3 times during the night. I thought the first time it happened, he'd actually woken himself up, and I got up, I turned on the lights, I went to see what was the issue, and he was actually still asleep. He was crying in his sleep, and he did this 2 more times that night. The one and only time he's done it. I don't really know why. I'm assuming it's because of his teething, but I'm going to preface all this by saying I'm very fortunate to have one of those unicorn babies that sleeps through the night. But within a few weeks of him being home, we learned his natural sort of routine. So that's the one thing I will say to you is be aware of your child's natural routine. That while you will be able to train them kind of to nap and go to sleep at certain times or within certain time frames, for the most part they are going to dictate those times But there are ways around that too, or ways of benefiting from that if you're prepared. And I'll get to that in a little bit. Like I mentioned, be completely aware that your routine, your baby's routine, is going to ebb and flow with their age, their developmental. For those of you who might not be familiar with, the Wonder Weeks app is a great app at explaining to you about the developmental stages the baby goes through and how that affects their behavior, sleep pattern, feeding, and all that. It's also a book as well. I have not read the book, but I do use the app. I think it was less than €4, I think, to purchase. Well worth it. So that's definitely something that will help you with your scheduling and your routine for your baby. The next thing is that the baby is important, of course, but so are the rest of you. You may have other children, you may have pets, you may have a wider family that live at home, it may just be yourself and your partner, you may be on your own. So just remember that the whole family unit is important, not just the baby. So it shouldn't always be about the baby. So you're going to need to include balance in the schedule as well. I'm going to tell you how I do that when I go through sort of an average daily schedule for me and the baby. Another thing I will strongly suggest to you is that within a day, any given day, outside of looking at the baby, you will most likely have a number of things that you need and that you want to get done in that day. I call this my priority list, and I write this list down in a notebook either every evening or every morning, so that I know. And I write it down in a hierarchy of things that like absolutely must get done, really need to get done, and it would be great if these get done. The reason I do this is my son, while he sleeps throughout the night, he sleeps for 11 hours, more or less. He rarely naps for extended period times during the day. He does take 3 naps a day, and they range in sort of 20 minutes to 80 minutes in length, and I never know what I'm going to get. I could get 3 20-minute naps, I could get a 20-minute nap and an 80-minute nap and another 25-minute nap. It just depends. So having your priority list done in a hierarchy and not having to think about it as soon as your child goes down allows you to tick a few things off as quickly as possible, and then those that just simply don't get done can move on to the next day, or they get delegated, whatever the case may be. But it just means that when you're frazzled throughout the day, that you're not trying to remember what it is you want to get done. If it's written down either on paper or on your phone, whatever works for you. The other thing to remember is there will be down days, and what I consider a down day is a day where absolutely nothing gets done. The baby is overly fussy, you're exhausted, and you basically spend most of the day sitting on the couch, holding a crying baby, watching telly. Those days happen for everybody. There'll also be days that everything gets done. You are super parent, and you could run a marathon on top of everything you've achieved there, and they sort of balance out with the down days. A big sort of challenge couples can face when it comes to parenting a new baby in particular is there will always be a primary parent. There will always be that one parent who is slightly more responsible for everything that goes on, not just relating to the child, but generally within a household. And when you think about it, that's how companies are run. While there's a hierarchy and there's loads of people to delegate to and loads of people involved in the running of a company, there is that head honcho, the CEO, the MD, whatever name you want to give to them, who is responsible for the overseeing of the direction of the company. In our house, I am the primary parent. As I mentioned in my intro, I'm a stay-at-home mum. This was a decision that my husband and I took. The option was open to either of us to stay at home. I retired from my career. Actually, my husband and I worked together in what was my company but became our company. When we took the decision to try for a family, we made the decision that I would retire, that we would essentially close down the company. My husband took the time, it took us about 3 years to work towards this because we were so booked in advance. During that time, my husband went back to college, he re-educated himself, and he got a job in his new career. He is an e-commerce manager for a large transatlantic company. So we planned for this and we made decisions and sacrifices in order for me to be a stay-at-home mum. That was important to us. Every family is different. But because of this, I am essentially the primary parent, as in I am the day-to-day caregiver. Obviously, that does not mean I do everything. It just means that I look after the day-to-day care of our son and everything that goes with that. And then my husband supports me when he's here and when he's home, and on special occasions that I might need it, that he would not necessarily be around for. So these are all important aspects to bear in mind when you are looking at or creating a schedule for your family or for your life, because it's really not just a baby schedule. The whole thing has to fit together. A really important aspect is delegation, like with everything, but also accepting the flaws of the people involved. So I mentioned the whole primary parent thing, and I know a lot of mums in particular can feel overwhelmed that they're expected to do absolutely everything. And that's not what I'm getting at by saying you're the primary parent. What I'm getting at is that you are the person who is coordinating and driving everything and making sure that everything is on track. Because let's face it, a single person needs to take responsibility for that. It's unrealistic to think that that's a shared responsibility, unless of course you individually you together sit down and divide up to individual tasks that each person is responsible for. If that works in your family, wonderful. It probably doesn't for many. So I'm going to talk you through my weekday routine with my son, and I will include how things have changed over that time and what we've done as a family unit to make it work better for us. So maybe I'll tell you very briefly what our schedule looked like before the baby. So before the baby came along, my husband was in full-time employment, and he would get up around 7:15 and get dressed, have his breakfast, and he would leave for work about 7:45. He would be at work throughout the day, and he would come home around 6 o'clock when we would have dinner. He would exercise. We would then probably relax or do whatever evening activity that was on, and we would go to bed. For me, I probably would have gotten up. I was pregnant at the time. I had already been retired. I'm retired almost 2.5 years now. For those of you who know my backstory, you'll know that in the last 2 years I've had 3 pregnancies. So for the last couple of years, I have largely been on bed rest or resting while pregnant. And so I would wake around 9:30. I generally, because I was heavily pregnant, wouldn't do a great deal. I wasn't allowed to do a great deal medically. And so a lot of my daytime was spent resting and relaxing and staying pregnant. I would cook dinner, my husband would come home, and the evening would progress, like I said. So for the duration of my pregnancy and the duration of the last couple of years, things have been very low-key and relaxed because of our situation. Now, since having the baby, as I mentioned, my son sleeps throughout the night. He wakes about 7 a.m. in the morning, and he is very happy to talk away and chat away to himself for about 45 minutes. And at about 7:45, he vocally indicates to me that he would like to get up. At this point, my husband, who has switched his exercising to do first thing in the morning, now gets up at 6 a.m. He exercises, showers, has his breakfast, and by the time Indiana is sort of, I'm awake, he is back up in our room getting dressed. I then get up, talk to Indiana, and I tell him I'm going to the bathroom. When he sort of quietens down, I go to the bathroom, I sort of like wash and come back out, and then I take him into his nursery where I change his nappy. I then put him in his crib in there, and he plays. We've got like a birdie mobile that he likes to play with, and I go downstairs and I make myself a coffee. My husband has already prepared his bottle. He does that when he's making his breakfast. I head back upstairs to the nursery. James is getting ready to go to work. He leaves and heads to work, and I feed Indiana in the nursery. And while I'm doing that, I'm probably on my phone, or I have an iPad up there. I watch some YouTube, catch up on emails, bit of social media, and all of that. After he's fed and winded, we head back into our bedroom, and I put him in front of, I sit him on the bed. I have a sort of a special little soft seat for him, and he watches some YouTube while I get dressed. We then come downstairs, and he sits in his high chair while I tidy the kitchen and make my breakfast and have it. And then after that, I bring him upstairs, we change his nappy, and we do some floor time upstairs. We have like a little activity gym up there for him. So we do some floor time and some tummy time, and we might read a story, things like that. It's now probably headed for about 9:30, 10 o'clock, depending on, you know, how long all that's taken us. And this is where we come to the time frame for our first nap. So he can fall asleep for his first nap anywhere between 9:30 and 10:15. And as I mentioned before, he naps for about 20 to 80 minutes. It just depends. Because I have my list already prepared, I know precisely what it is I want or need to get done in that short time. So I go through the list. So sometimes it's putting on washes, folding washes, ironing, the dishwasher, recording these videos. It just depends what the priority is for that day. Now, one of the key things that I am always doing is preparing for the next round of baby care. So before I begin whatever task I have, I'm always putting a bottle in the warmer to warm it up, so that when he wakes up, I can change him and feed him immediately. There is no waiting or crying or, you know, upsetness over that. And this sort of evolves throughout the day. Once he goes down for his first nap, and once he wakes up and he's fed and changed, he's then generally awake for about 2 hours. And this is how our schedule goes throughout the day. As I mentioned, he naps about 3 times in the day. So I have a morning nap around 10. I have a sort of an early afternoon nap around 1, and then I have a late afternoon nap around 4. And that's his last nap generally of the day. And he has obviously a bottle after each nap. And then he has another bottle around 6 or 6:30. And depending on how tired he is, and this is where learning your child's natural routine and their cues, because the baby really will tell you all of the time what's going on or what they need or what's next for them. So if you take the time to learn those cues from your baby, it'll certainly help you. So around 7:30, he will start to get tired. Sometimes it doesn't happen till around 8:30, but generally speaking, from around 7:30, 6:45 is when we start our nighttime routine. And our nighttime routine generally consists of a bath, a bottle, a book, and bedtime. The whole process probably takes us about 45 minutes, and we do it together as a couple. It's a nice kind of, you know, family bonding time. And often then, after the baby has gone down to sleep, my husband will go for a walk. James recently changed jobs, And prior to, say, the start of this year, he used to walk on his lunch break. He now really doesn't get that opportunity. The job is more involved, he is busier, and he takes a shorter lunch break to have a shorter day. And so he will generally go for a walk and take the dog at that point. And I will sort of relax, have a shower, whatever I might need to do. And then when he comes back, the two of us will relax or catch up together or play a game, watch a movie, watch a TV show, do whatever, you know, we want to do that night. So you can see how our schedule has come to include the baby. And what was important for us, particularly around creating this schedule, because it is something that we did together, and that nighttime routine or that bedtime routine I spoke about, we actually didn't introduce that until he was about just before he was 3 months old. So we're probably coming up on about 7 or 8 weeks of using that, and that has made a big difference to us. Prior to this, prior to having this bedtime schedule, our son would, as I said, always slept through the night, but you were never sure what time he was going to go to bed. And that was a key thing. He could go to bed or fall asleep for the night from anything from 8:30 p.m. to 3 a.m. and anything in between. And a lot of the time we used to alternate and just basically stand there holding a crying baby, because he would get to a point where he would just have a complete meltdown. And I remember it was the first night I joined Slimming World, and I was sitting in the car after I had, you know, been to the class, thinking to myself, there has to be more to life than sitting every night with a crying baby in our arms, praying for him to go to sleep. And so I said to James when I got home that night, I said, tonight we're going to try and do a bedtime routine and see how it worked. And it immediately did. Now, of course, we were very fortunate. You could do the same and it might not work as well the first time. But if you listen to your child and their needs, hopefully you will be able to find a solution that works for you. And you have to remember that ultimately, regardless of whether or not your child that you have now is going to be your first or is your first, or whether it's your fifth, for this point in your life, it's the first time either of you or your family have been there. It's a new schedule, it's a new routine for everybody, regardless of how big or small that unit is. And to give yourself grace in getting there and establishing the routine. And as I said, it will ebb and flow and change. But if you've put in place things to help you, like the priority list, prepping for as much things in advance as you can, it will work easier for you. Like I said, some days you'll feel like super mum or dad, and other days you will basically go to the shops with poo smeared all over you and the baby wrapped in 2 blankets because there's no clean clothes and you have no coffee. Similar things happen to all of us, and you've got your down days where the baby routine is completely out the window. Like I said at the start of this video, go with your gut when creating any kind of routine. Don't make it just about the baby. Include everybody in your life, you know, in your family unit who needs to be included. Get help and support from that family unit, but remember that one person in that unit is the primary driver, and often it is the primary carer of the child or children. Like I said, in my case, that is me. My husband is very, very supportive, but one of his flaws is that he will not necessarily perceive an issue in advance. But if you say to him, can you do X, Y, and Z for me? He will do that with bells on. Or can you go get me this, this, and this? He wouldn't necessarily envisage you need those things, but he will go do it if asked. So that's a flaw of his. I would love for him to know, oh yes, it's bath time. I need to prepare X, Y, and Z. he really doesn't see it like that. He's not, his brain doesn't work that way. It works in other wonderful ways, but just not that way. So that's something I'm accepting of him, and he is accepting of me, that I'm very demanding. So, you know, I hope this has given you some inspiration or ideas on how to create a successful baby schedule, and to make you feel a little bit better about the perhaps randomness of your days, because yes, they are pretty random, but if you take the time and are relaxed, you will begin to notice the sort of the recurrences and the repeat. And of course, not every single day is the same, and there are those ad hoc days, but for the most part, if you can get prepared, stay organized, always be working a little bit ahead of yourself where possible, write or record things down. And another thing, actually, particularly if you have multiple people involved in the sort of the care of your child, and you all need to know certain information, particularly when they're very small, for example, like nappy changes and bottle feeding. Let me just grab the name of the app that we have used. This is one we just downloaded from the App Store. It's called Baby Tracker. It allows you to have multiple people using the same account that synchronizes, and in it you can record things like when the baby's fed, what they were fed, how they were fed, when they were changed, what the contents of the nappy was, their sleep, their pumping if you're an expressing mum, and all of their activities if you're going into that kind of detail. As you can hear, my little dude is awake from his nap. For those interested, he has been napping for 40 minutes this time round, so not bad. But I'm going to say thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked this video. Please give it a thumbs up if you did. If you've any tips or tricks or advice for me or any of the new parents watching, please leave it in the comments below. And I hope you will subscribe to my channel. As I say, I make videos on motherhood and lifestyle. Thank you so much, guys. Bye.